Chapter 15. Dad sat at the kitchen table staring at the salt and pepper shakers. He'd been doing that for the past 10 minutes. I, on the other hand, had been pacing up and down. I couldn't sit still. I kept thinking about Mum and remembering the argument we'd had last night. I'd let the vampire in the graveyard escape, and then I hadn't said anything about Vladimir. Now he'd done something to Bane, and the one person who could help me stop him was gone. She's gone. The thought made me wince. "We have to find her," I said at last. "What was her mission this morning? Where did she go?" Dad's eyes were watery.
"She didn't say. I contacted Hunter's Corp, but they wouldn't tell me much. They don't like outsiders knowing their business. They just said they're looking for her and not to call the police."
"What if I spoke to them?" I suggested. "I'm a hunter. They might tell me what they know."
"You're not a full hunter yet," he said, "but there might be another way to find out where she went."
He stood up and headed to the hall.
"I can't get in touch with her. I think her phone's been destroyed, but she might have left something behind."
He slid open the secret panel and typed a code into the keypad. To my surprise, the basement door clicked open. "You know the code?" I asked.
"I watched your mum typing it in when she wasn't looking."
I raised my eyebrows. "You spied on her?" He didn't answer. The floor creaked as he walked down the steps. I followed him. It felt strange to be in here without Mum. Dad looked out of place among the training equipment. He glanced over at the wall of weapons with concern. I realised he had never been down here before. He tried to open one of the cupboards, but it was locked as usual. My eyes were drawn towards the oldest-looking cabinet. It was made of polished mahogany. I'd always wondered what was inside. Dad noticed what I was staring at. He tried to open it, but it was locked like all the others.
"There must be something around here that can tell us where she is," he said quietly.
Desperate, I grabbed a sword off the wall and carried it over to the cabinet.
"Be careful,"
Dad said. I slid the tip of the sword into the gap between the cabinet doors and wrenched them open, cracking the wood and sending splinters flying. The moment I saw what was inside, I gasped. There were bottles and herbs and ancient-looking books. There was even an old cauldron, just like the one I'd seen Elsie and the other witches using in Deirdre's living room. "What's all this?" I asked.
"Those things belonged to a close friend of your mother's," he said, his voice sad. "I didn't know your mum had kept them."
"What friend?" I asked. I didn't think Mum had any friends. I touched the cauldron. It was rough, the metal rusted in places. I traced my fingers over the herbs.
"You didn't know her," Dad replied. "She died when you were young."
"Mum's friend was a witch, wasn't she?" I guessed.
"Yes," he answered. "Your mum's friend was a witch. Her name was Lisa. They were close friends for years and then her death changed your mother."
"How did she die?" I asked.
"That's a story for your mother to tell," he replied.
"It had something to do with vampires, didn't it?" I ventured. He didn't answer. Mum's friend had been a witch, but for some reason she'd died. It made me think of April. What would I do if something happened to her? I didn't even want to think about it. Is that why Mum had never told me about witches? Was it too painful?
"None of this stuff can help us," Dad said. "These are magical items. Only a witch can use them."
With that, he shut the cabinet as if he was closing a door on the past. He took the sword from my hand and went to break open a chest. While his back was turned, I silently reopened the cabinet and rifled through the pages of the books inside. One of them caught my eye. It contained several pages with pictures of necklaces and crystals. Thankfully, it was a thin book, so I was able to shove it into the waistband of my trousers. As the night wore on, we carried on searching the basement, breaking into every cupboard and every drawer. Inside one of the chests, I found a stack of papers. One piece of paper bore the words Hunters Corp. It had a phone number on it. While Dad wasn't paying attention, I stuffed the paper in my pocket. Eventually, Dad slumped back against a pile of books and let out a sigh. There was nothing down here. Mum had left no clues to tell us where she'd gone. Dad called me over to him, and we sat together among the mess of papers and weapons and books.
"She'll be okay,"
he said, wrapping his arm around me.
"Your mum is tough as old boots. Nothing frightens her."
His eyes glistened. "We have to find her," I whispered. I just wished I knew how. What if she was hurt? What if she wasn't alive? I clutched at my throat. "Stop it," I told myself harshly. "This isn't helping." I had to do something useful. I couldn't mope around like this. Mum would never forgive me. There was something important I had to do. I'd wanted Mum's help before, but now she wasn't here. I'd have to do it myself. Bane had vanished. Someone had hurt him, and I was sure I knew who that someone was. Vladimir Knox. With or without Mum's help, I had to stop him. But I would need backup. I felt inside my pocket for the piece of paper I'd taken and gripped it tight in my fist. Upstairs in my room, I listened to Dad cleaning his teeth, shutting his bedroom door and climbing into bed. While I waited, I flicked through the book I'd taken from the basement. The writing was small and lots of the words were long and unfamiliar. I could barely read it. After a while, I just scanned the pages, but I couldn't find any mention of the Lacuna gem. Soon, my eyes blurred with tiredness. Setting the book aside, I waited until I heard snoring, and then I opened my door and sneaked downstairs. In my hand, I held the sheet of paper I'd taken from the basement. Once I was in the hallway, I sat by the phone and clicked on the lamp. For the 100th time, I wished I had a mobile, like every other kid my age, but Mum's words rang in my head. "Phones and training don't mix." Apparently, I wouldn't be able to focus if I could message my friends whenever I wanted. I sighed. Friends was the wrong word. I only had one. April. My stomach clenched at the thought of her. I was pretty sure she didn't like me much right now. For the first time in a long time, I wished there was someone else I could turn to. But I didn't have any other friends. I thought back to when I first became so unpopular. Year 1. That was the year. I'd been a troublemaker with my terrible rages and love of throwing chairs. I remembered Mum arguing with parents at the school gates after they had told their children to stay away from me. Apparently, Grandma Elsie hadn't cared that I was a rule breaker. April was the only person who ever invited me to her birthday parties. The creak of Dad's bed snapped me out of my thoughts. I waited with bated breath, listening in case he left his bedroom. Silence. Keeping my breathing quiet, I pushed all thoughts of school out of my mind. I looked down at the paper in my hands. At the top, in tiny writing, was a phone number. I rang it. An electronic voice answered. "Speak, passcode." Passcode? I turned the paper over and saw a 5-digit number in Mum's handwriting. 87297, I said. After a few moments, the line clicked and a human voice spoke. "Hunters Corp, what's your business?" "Hello," I said, my voice croaky. "My name's ETTY STEELE. I'm phoning about my mum. I think—" "I'm reconnecting you," the voice said. The line cut off, and then another voice spoke, male and gruff.
"Hunter's Corp," he said. "How can I help you?"
"My name's Etty Steele."
"Steele?" the man interrupted. "You must be Felicity's daughter."
"Yes. What's happened to my mum?"
"I'm afraid that's classified," the man replied. "Miss Steele, I realise this must be a hard time for you, but the company is doing everything in its power to find your mother, I promise you."
"Well, where did she go?"
"Unfortunately, she was taken before she could tell us her location," he replied. "Your mother did things her own way. Take it as a lesson for when you become a hunter. Always follow company rules. Never go out on a mission alone."
"There must be something I can do," I said.
"You need to be patient and wait for us to do our job."
"Do you know who took her?" I asked.
"I cannot share that information with you, Miss Steele. I must ask that you let the company deal with—"
"Then I need backup," I said. "I need to capture a vampire."
The man spluttered. "What?"
"Vladimir Knox," I said. "He's a boy at my school, but he's a vampire. I think—"
"How do you know that name?" the man interrupted.
"I know more than his name. I know where he is."
"Miss Steele," he said, "we have not confirmed if he is a vampire or not yet. Your mother didn't believe he was."
"But he's real. He goes to Brightwood School," I said firmly.
"Miss Steele, your mother is missing and you're confused. It's natural to be emotional, but you need to stay out of this. It's not a job for little girls."
I clenched my fists. "Well, I'm going to capture him tomorrow, so you'd better be ready to come and get him when I call." I slammed the phone down and scrunched the paper in my hand. "I'm not just a little girl," I thought angrily. "I'm a hunter." Chapter 16. The world felt out of balance and just plain wrong without Mum. I didn't sleep very well that night. I kept having nightmares in which I was searching for her, and all I could hear was her yelling for help. I don't think Dad slept well either. The times I woke up, I heard him pacing about in his room. I imagined him staring at his phone, waiting for a call. Occasionally, I'd hear him crying quietly. I think my nightmares were better than listening to that. As I got ready for school, I tied my hair into a ponytail and glanced in the mirror. I was pale, and there were bags under my eyes. Clenching my fists, I turned away from the mirror. I packed an extra bag full of my black training clothes. I would need them later. Dad was working, so he couldn't pick me up from school. I told him I was going to April's. But if I managed to get the truth out of Dimmy, I'd be going to rescue Bane instead. Even if I had to search the whole town, I was determined to find him. I had to do something right. I have to do something. The thought of sitting around waiting to hear what had happened to Mum was unbearable. I shoved the magical book into my bag along with Hunter's Corp's phone number and then headed for the door. Halfway there, I stopped. I walked over to my sock drawer. As I reached inside, I paused. I almost turned away, but then I dug through all the socks until I reached the bottom. There it was, hidden from sight. My ironwood stake. I'd chosen ironwood because it was hard to break and it didn't splinter easily. It would be perfect for stabbing a vampire. I grabbed it and shoved it down the waistband of my trousers, covering it with my school jumper. I just hoped I wouldn't have to use it.
"Maybe I should call the police,"
Dad said as he drove me to school. It was a grey, cloudy day with spots of rain hitting the windows. "You can't," I replied. "The police can't get involved in vampire stuff. They wouldn't believe you."
"I should be doing something," he whispered, his voice wobbly.
"Hunter's Corp would cut us off completely if you got the police involved. They might even stop searching for Mum."
"I know," he said. Your mum would say the same thing. I'm just worried about her.
I squeezed his hand. Me too.
Don't go anywhere with April after school, he said. Stay at her house. I don't want you out in the dark.
He looked miserable.
I can't lose you as well.
We'll go straight to hers, I lied, feeling awful.
Is April's gran picking you up?
He asked. Yes, I said. Another lie. No one was picking me up. He kissed me goodbye and I marched into school, clutching my bag of hunter clothes. I pulled my hood up against the rain as I scanned the playground. The police were still searching for Bain. One of their cars was flashing blue and red lights in the car park. They should have been after Dimmy. He was the last person Bain had seen before he disappeared. My stomach churned. Something just didn't fit, though. I thought of the witch's prophecy. Why was Dimmy pretending he was a normal school kid if he was so powerful? Did he need children for something? Was that why he was hanging around in a school? After a few minutes, I went to hide in the trees on the school field. I had a plan to get Dimmy alone, but I had to be late for school for it to work. It was cold waiting outside, but at least the trees protected me from the rain. Once the playground was empty and the school was quiet, I walked into the office. I was 5 minutes late. They asked me to sign in, and then I made my way to class, my shoes wet and squelchy. "Miss Gravel," I said as I walked into class, "the office needs to speak to Dimmy and me." I crossed my fingers behind my back, hoping she would believe my lie. Her brow furrowed, making her glasses go wonky, but she nodded. Dimmy rose from his seat and slowly made his way towards me. His sunglasses and bow tie were purple. He appeared so harmless, it was almost impossible to believe he was a vampire. He followed me out of class. He didn't walk beside me. Instead, he hung back a few steps. Neither of us spoke. Nearly there, I thought. Moving like lightning, I grabbed his arm and pulled him into the girls' toilets and shut the door behind us. Dimmy backed away towards the opposite wall, which had the hand dryer on it. Mirrors and sinks lined one wall and toilet cubicles on the other. What do you want?" he asked, his voice shaking. "I know what you are," I said. "I don't know what you're talking about," he replied, taking another step back. He bumped into the hand dryer and set it off. The noise made him jump. He breathed heavily, his hand over his heart. This is all an act, I told myself. He's not really afraid. "You're a vampire," I said. I didn't think it was possible for his face to go any paler, but it did. No, he said. "Your skin is pale, you wear sunglasses indoors, you're icy cold, and you drink human blood." He sank to his knees and buried his head in his hands. I scowled. "What did you do to Bain Larkin?" His sunglasses slipped down to reveal wide, panic-stricken eyes. His pupils were huge. "Bain?" he said. Nothing. I didn't do anything to him." "Did you drink his blood?" "No." "You were the last person to see him," I said. "He annoyed you, so you hurt him." Dimmy's shoulders slumped. "How did you know?" he asked. A thrill of triumph rushed through me. "Vampires are evil killers," I replied. "I knew it had to be you." He shook his head. "I didn't hurt anyone, I swear. I meant, how did you know I was a vampire?" "What?" I said, taken aback. "I am a vampire." He stumbled to his feet and pushed his purple sunglasses back into place. "But I didn't hurt anyone. I'm not evil." "Of course you are. You drink human blood." "No," he replied.
I've never had a drop of blood, not even animal blood. I can't."
His voice trailed off. I narrowed my eyes in suspicion. "Then what were you drinking yesterday?"
"Cranberry juice," he replied, "just like I said."
"Vampires can't survive without blood."
"I can," he said. "I don't need blood. I eat normal food."
"You're lying," I said. "Vampires can't survive without blood. You did something to Bane Larkin. You must have done."
"I didn't."
"Then what happened to him?" I asked. "He was teasing you and then you walked off together. What happened after that?" Dimmy's hands shook.
"We walked down the stairs and then he pushed me against the wall. He said I was a fairy, and then he stole my sunglasses and put them on."
"So, what did you do?" I asked. "Did you get angry? Did you attack him?"
No,
he said.
"I didn't do anything. I got out my spare sunglasses. He walked off, wearing my purple ones."
"Then what?"
"Nothing," he said. "I went downstairs, bumped into April."
This can't be true, I thought. It's all lies. Vampires have to drink blood to survive. That's what Mum has always told me. And if Dimmy didn't make Bane Larkin vanish, then who did? "What about the vampire clan?" I asked. "What do you know about them? They've killed 2 women.
I don't know anything about a clan,"
he said, and then his voice cracked.
"Killed? People have been killed?"
"Yes," I replied. "The clan is looking for a gem. Do you know anything about that?"
"No."
"I don't believe you," I said. "I don't believe anything you've told me." I pulled the stake out of my waistband. Dimmy backed up against the wall, holding up his hands in surrender.
"Please," he said. "I'm telling the truth."
"I'm capturing you and sending you to Traxxas," I told him.
No, not there."
He glanced around for an exit, but there was no escape. I was blocking the only way out. "On the way to Hunter headquarters, you're going to tell me where Bane Larkin is." As I got closer to him, he started to cry quietly.
"I'm telling the truth," he said. "I don't know anything about a clan or what happened to Bane. I just walked downstairs and met April. I didn't hurt Bane."
A tear slid down his cheek. "You're lying," I retorted, "and you have no way to prove your story." I was about to reach out and grab him when the door to the toilets burst open. I spun around and dropped the stake. April stood in the doorway. She walked in, her arms crossed over her chest. "Actually, he can," she said in a loud but shaky voice. "He can prove it because I was there, and I know where Bane went."